the question of wellness has become so foregrounded. It's always been important, but foregrounded through the COVID pandemic, right? But more importantly, a lot of the times when we talk about wellness, we're often talking about the wellness of students in institutions. But what's missing is those who are at the interface of students and the institution, which are staff and practitioners. And so today I'm delighted that we have two of our alumni joining us, Laura King and Dreux, and they're going to introduce themselves. And the way this works is we just, I ask some questions and then Laura and Dreux respond and we go from there. It's very informal. Hope you enjoy it. It's always been inspiring for me. It's such a treat to see both of you, Dreux and Laura. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself in terms of your current position? And briefly, what brings you to this topic? Again, we don't want too much, like maybe a 2-minute introduction would be great. Should we start with you, Laura?
Sure. Hi, I'm Laura King. I am currently the Human Resources Administrator for the Michigan State Police Department, which is a new title for me, so I'm getting used to that. I've been working in student life and engagement for the last 23 years in different student-focused positions, HR, culinary services, REHS. Yeah. Outside of work, I like to teach indoor cycling and yoga.
Thank you for that, Laura. What brought you to this topic, Laura? Just briefly, what got you intrigued when we sent out the invitation? Would you like to join us, Laura?
Well, I think you might remember many days having talks with Laura about getting through grad school and being a working professional, a mother of 2 young children, trying to, kind of figure everything out. I think, the important thing for me during grad school was making sure that I was finding time to keep active. My iPad was pretty instrumental in grad school in terms of I take it to the gym, read all the things that they ask us to read every single day. And that was pretty much what got me through the whole program.
Thank you so much, Laura. Dreux, could you please introduce yourself too, please?
Yeah, pleasure. First, thank you all for having me and inviting me to the space today. I'm Dreux Baker. I use he, him pronouns, and I currently serve on campus as the Assistant Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion under REHS, which is Residence Education and Housing Services. So super long title, but a fun way to say that I interact with the students that live in our residence halls and cover any incidents they may have based on bias.
And Dreux, what also drew you to this topic for today?
Yeah, I think wellness is super important. I think hopefully today we can have some expanded definitions of what it means, ways that we can learn from us as adults and staff of what wellness is and best ways to do so. I've been on personal journeys, but I've also been on community-based journeys of what wellness looks like, and I'm excited to just have that conversation.
Okay. Well, let's get that started then, Dreux. I mean, let's just piggyback on what you said. One of the words wellness is thrown a lot around many circles, right? And it sounds like you have particular understanding that seems to be broader than what maybe people are conceptualizing. So what does the word wellness mean to you, Dreux, based on your own experiences?
Yeah, wellness typically means to me just the ability to make good choices. And I like to talk about wellness in many different realms. So of course we have physical wellness when we think of working out, but we also have intellectual wellness, spiritual wellness, obviously mental health wellness. But one of the things I don't think is talked about a lot, and it shows up a lot in the work that I do that I wanted to make sure we brought to this space, is like this idea of community wellness or collective wellness, right? We hear a lot about collective trauma through some of the systems that have happened over throughout history, or even through institutions that are here in the United States, but we don't really talk about the collective wellness of it and what that looks like. So I think, wellness is having the opportunity to make those choices, but I think we have to acknowledge too, everyone doesn't have the same opportunities to make good choices. So oftentimes they're left with making the best choice they can under those circumstances. So just having an opportunity to make some good choices, but understanding those choices and options look different for everyone based on circumstances as well.
Thank you, Dreux. Laura, For you, what does that word mean for you based on your experiences?
I definitely agree with a lot of things that Dreux said. For me, it's feeling like I'm in control of the environment around me, may it be myself, or the things that are being thrown at me. For me, wellness has to be pre-planned. I have to have intentional effort put into my daily life about what that looks like. But I think, feeling safe, feeling like you're in control, like Dreux said, making good decisions.
So it's very interesting as I'm listening to you. I mean, thank you so much for sharing your definitions, because there's so much to unpack here, right? So one is to understand wellness at different kinds of scales, but one of the things that I'm hearing from you, both of you, is this idea of freedom, the freedom to choose, and the freedom to control, right? And it's interesting, you talked about these different levels. You talked about the physical, the intellectual, the mental, the spiritual, but Dreux, you also brought this whole collective wellness. But what's also interesting, Laura, is that you also brought this whole idea of intentionality, being intentional, right? One could argue that many of these things apply to all the levels that Dreux's talking about: spiritual wellness, community wellness. That would need it's not something that just can happen, but it needs to be pre-planned or planned. So with that said, let's go back to you, Laura. How do you engage in wellness? How do you engage in what you define as in being controlled, being safe? How do you engage that within your role, either at work or outside work? And more importantly, how do you bring that intentionality, like you said, pre-planned? Like, what are you doing?
Well, I've always been on a journey that has struggled with activity and things like that. And I think as I got older, I realized the importance of the activity levels in my life and my attention span, endorphin production, like how I was feeling as a whole. So for me, when I, made a more concerted effort towards it, it was about 2008, I'll be honest with you, when I decided, okay, I'm going to make a commitment to 5 times a week, being physically active. And I've been very, very committed to that since 2008. When I was in the HALE program, my workouts had to be combined with homework. And so that's where, my iPad came in really, really helpful. But when I got out of grad school, I was like, wow, I have all this time. What am I going to do with all this extra time that, I had put towards homework and reading and all of these things? And that's when I started teaching exercise classes a lot. Prior to COVID, I was teaching 16 spin and cycling classes outside of my full-time job. A lot of things changed, obviously, through COVID, and I had to get kind of creative about what that looked like, because we were, in isolation. We weren't going to places where there were a lot of people. So I was teaching exercise classes out of my garage, and trying to keep our community together, because I do think it's really, really important to find people that have the like goals as you, or have similarities in the things that you want to accomplish, because I did lose a lot of friends that I thought were friends once I decided to be committed to this, because it would interfere with where I was going for myself.
So just to quickly follow up, Laura, you talked about, being physically active 5 times a week, and then shifting because, and, it was interesting, in time scholarship, we call it folding time together, where you are doing your exercise and getting homework done. Like, we call that folding, right? You fold something together. But more importantly, after the program, you talked about also teaching. Is that a way for you to hold yourself accountable? But more importantly, how does this physical activity help you embody wellness? That's my curiosity, is what is it about physical work that provides you what you defined it as, being in control of your environment and so forth. Like what is it about physical work?
I was raised in a family where you work really hard, you put forth a ton of effort, and there was an interesting connection when I made it a job because of the importance of doing a good job for me. That has helped to keep me very connected to it. The other part that's really helpful for me is the community around being a teacher in those classes. I didn't realize how much inspiration came from my students in my classes until I didn't have them during COVID and I was teaching to a computer. Once I started getting back at it again and my students were there, I mean, I'm feeding off of them just as much as they're feeding off of me telling them what to do. But seeing the effort that they put forth helps you get more invigorated and more intense about what you're doing as a teacher.
But what is it about the physical exercise that gives you joy? That's what I'm curious about too.
You feel
Laura.
powerful.
Ah, okay. You feel
powerful.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I don't like to put, you know, different ages into exercise, but it's really helpful to think that, you know, I'm a middle-aged person and I'm going to town with, you know, some of the people that are just starting out in college and they're looking at me like, this, you know, this lady, she's a lot older than me. I don't think she can do this for me. And then, you know, when I push them, they're like, oh, she can do it.
I love that. I love that. Dreux, we've heard from Laura. How do you engage it and why? I'm curious about the two, right?
Yeah, I'm super fortunate that my day-to-day work has a lot to do with wellness because since I function in the DEI world, you know, it's oftentimes a collective wellness. And one of the things I try to do is, you know, be a listening ear, provide spaces, resources, really trying to give voice to students who have been harmed or are some of the most marginalized students. So that's a way that, you know, helping people and helping others, especially those when maybe don't have the resources to help themselves, is a way of wellness. That's during work. Like Laura, I also am physically active. I've set some goals for myself and able to hit some fitness goals. And I love it. I'm with you, Laura. Like, you just feel powerful, like the adrenaline rush, the endorphins that come with it. I find they spill over to other realms. And, you know, I was going to talk about this a little bit more too, but one of the things I've noticed with wellness in certain areas, discipline in certain areas, consistency in certain areas, that overflows often, right? So I often talk about, you know, if you want to be well in one area or all areas, you know, start with one area. Start with physical fitness, because what happened for me is like, okay, I wanted to work out and lose weight. That stopped me from staying up late, right? Because I want to wake up in the morning. Now I'm getting more sleep. Now I'm waking up earlier. Now I have a lot more free time to be mindful of the day before I start or read at night, you know. So it was a way that wellness in my personal life and wellness choices that I made specifically were able to kind of spill over into other realms. And that's one of the things I enjoy as well. Like, you begin to see, hey, I'm physically more well, but I'm actually mentally more well. And that has allowed me to be, you know, spiritually more well in different ways as well. So it's an enjoyable process to watch and see when you set those goals and work through them.
Very, very inspiring to hear both of you. But I want to quickly probe you, Dreux, a little bit more. You mentioned, I'm curious about the why. So you said you felt powerful.
Right.
What does that word powerful mean for you, Dreux? Like, what does power mean to you?
So
not in terms of the grabbing power. I know that's not what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, benching for 3. That's really powerful. No, I think the power for me was that realizing that if I set a goal and I consistently chip away at that goal, then over time you achieve it, right? And that's a lesson in all things, not just wellness, not just physical wellness, but, you know, if you want to lose weight, if you want to read more, like, you don't have to read a whole book today. You just need to read 10 pages a day, right? Or you just need to decide, I'm reading 10 pages a week, wherever you are that you can start. So it's something empowering about this idea that, going back to earlier, like this idea that I have choices, that I have freedoms, that I have options. And when I exercise those in a in a wellness realm, I can actually achieve those. Because it's not about the actual power, it's about the empowerment that you get from going and yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I love listening to both of you. And as a researcher, I'm collecting data here and analyzing it at the same time. But, one of the things I'm listening to you and I'm like, well, two of you both talk about the role of community. Like Laura, you talking about how we could do wellness on our own, but there's something powerful about seeing younger folks trying to keep up with you, which is interesting, or this idea about accountability, like how you said how because of COVID it became virtual, it didn't feel the same way. So that relational aspect of it, which kind of connects to what you said, Dreux, earlier about your workplace, right? Connecting with students, trying to do something. But what also I found fascinating, what you were sharing, Dreux, earlier, is that how wellness in one area spills over in other areas, right? That's such a something I haven't considered. Laura, does that resonate with you? This idea that, if you work on something physical, somehow it kind of percolates other parts of your life. Does that resonate, or does that look different for you, Laura?
Well, for me, I've always been very challenged with comprehension and attention. And I especially got really connected to that in my own challenges with it during COVID, because I had a very stressful position at the university. I unfortunately work in an area, or at the time, where none of our hourly employees had a lot of work to do when the students were sent home. So I did have very stressful tasks that I had to do in terms of furloughs, recalls, and things like that. And so without those moments of intentional activity, I don't think that I could have physically gotten through that. So it was a pre-planned time every single day. I teach on my lunch hours on campus at IM West. And IM West was paying me through COVID to teach out of my garage for any of, the students or anyone that wanted to join in with me. And so it was intentional. Every day I had to take that break. And without taking that break on a lot of those days that were 12, 15-hour days of doing really hard, difficult work, I don't think that I could have gotten through that without that intentionality.
One of the things, thank you so much, Laura, for sharing that, because it's so nice to always nuance, the context where we're coming from as we're articulating our answers, but also articulating our experiences. Both of you mentioned the role of community. So this takes me to the next question. What type of support systems or networks do you engage with, or kind of feeds you when you're engaging in this kind of wellness work? So let's start with you, Dreux.
Yeah, one of the things I find most freeing and part of wellness is, as an adult and a working adult, is you have a lot more autonomy in picking the communities that you can interact with. Sometimes as students, we maybe are set on a residence floor, or we have to go to certain classes, right? But as an adult, like having the autonomy to pick the friends that I surround myself with, those have been huge for me. I have like-minded people who are willing to grow in all of those areas, willing to work on their wellness in all of those areas. The biggest, and I think friends and family are going to be one, but I think one of that's sort of an offshoot that I really wanted to mention is mentorship has been huge for me as I navigate, like, even physical wellness. I have people that I can reach out to say, hey, these are my next fitness goals. Do you have advice for me? Here is my next, like, even like, mental wellness and intellectual wellness. Hey, do you have any ideas or any books that I can read, or any articles that might be helpful? Because they know who I am. They know my career aspirations. They know what direction I want to go. So mentorship has been huge, and that's looked different. So I don't want people to think I'm getting to the point where now I'm a mentor as well, and I have mentors, but I have mentors who are, or people I looked up to in different ways, who are only a year or two older than me. Just have different experiences or further along where they want to be. So it's super helpful. Yeah, so I think mentorship is the one I wanted to mention that I didn't want, because I know family and friends, I think we're all going to say something, around there. And also students too. Oh my God, they keep you young. They keep you vibrant, right? Just sort of what Laura was talking about, like being in spaces where it's a certain kind of fire that students have. They have this curiosity, right? They have this intrigue. They're learning about themselves. They're learning about the world, learning about, possible careers and futures. And I love being around that. I sometimes forget how old I am because students keep you so young and you.
You're a lot younger than me.
Laura.
I don't know how you feel though about, I feel like helping others helps you help yourself.
Absolutely.
I've trained a lot of college students that want to be indoor cycling teacher. They come to me, they're like, how did you become a teacher? And I'm like, I don't, like sometimes you just don't remember how you ended up in something. And then you're like, this person wants to be like me. Why would they want to be like me? And then, it helps you help yourself when you're helping others achieve the goals that they want to accomplish.
Laura, were there other support networks? So Drew talked about family, friends, mentors, and you were talking about how mentoring others is a reciprocity, right? It's a reciprocal relationship. Were there other support systems that you draw on that we've not discussed yet?
Well, I think it's, finding people that demonstrate the things of where you're going and then, asking them how they did that. What did they do? Being connected in communities of where you want to go is also helpful. One of the great things that was afforded to me as becoming an indoor cycling instructor at rec sports on campus is we got to have the ability to take new certifications when those groups came onto campus. So what we would do is we would house them to do their training, and then the university would get to send some of the students as like a trade for the money. So I got a number of certifications just by being a part of that community and teaching cycling classes. I got 5 Yoga Fit certifications. I got PIO certified. And those were all things that I got just by being a part of a community.
Mm-hmm. So, in the HALE MA, we have a lot of students who I would say are just trying to live day by day because of just the pressures of work, family, other crises, the pandemic. And so I'm just curious for you, Laura and Drew, what is it about, say, the HALE MA program that helped you to kind of navigate this and keep the wellness, it sounds to me, first and foremost, center in your lives? It wasn't like pushed aside, right? It seemed like it was there. What is it about? Did the HALE MA program in any way help or shape or inform many of the things you're talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just reflecting upon that because I think so. I did my master's obviously here in HALE, but previous to that, I did my bachelor's in medical technology, so I was in a completely different field. But I think HALE had reinvigorated this idea, first off, of being a lifelong learner. It also showed me the pathways of different styles of learning. I think that throughout my undergraduate career, I thought learning had to be like you had to be fighting against something for it to be learning that is beneficial, right? It's like, I don't want to say hard because the program is definitely it's challenging, but like I was doing things and I'm like, I don't want to do this. I don't like to do it, right? It's not bringing me joy. And so going into the program and actually having a formal education tied to things that I'm personally and professionally interested in was just a whole new type of learning for me. Like the different styles of learning that happen in the program where it's like, read, write about it, read, discuss it, read, have a discussion board. So it was like just so many different ways to learn. And it really took me away from some of what we probably would refer to as probably antiquated, but the traditional learning models. Like you sit down, you look at a board, you get this vessel fill model. But also that learning has to not be fun. Like that was really my stance on a lot of things. And which is why I shied away from reading as pleasure when I was younger. It's like, oh, that's not fun. It's not something I want to do. And I think that HALE helped me with that. Like I read a lot more now because I was able to read about things that I'm interested in. It's not just doing it for the sake of education. So I think HALE really, really helped me with that lifelong learning portion, building some communities with people that also want to do those things, and teaching me, learning that, learning can be fun when you're passionate or involved in that field that you actually want to be in. So that was awesome. Yeah, and that was great for my wellness, obviously.
We'll talk about the wellness. Laura, does that resonate what you just heard, or are there other things you want to add in terms of how the HALE MA? And I know what happened to you because I was your advisor. There were a lot of things happening in life, so I'll let you speak about that. But yeah, Laura, how has the HALE MA, does it resonate what you've heard from Dreux, or is there other things you want to add?
For me, I mean, I think I was a bit older of a student, maybe than Dreux was when we took the programs. I was at a point in my career where I couldn't really see a path for myself. There were a couple things I wanted, I didn't get them. Somebody who was a confidant said, maybe you should go back to school. So HALE came for me at a point which was really critical for me as a professional of figuring out why things happen the way they happen in higher education and kind of understanding some of those frameworks. It was also really instrumental in me understanding myself better as a learner, as someone who is teaching students. And, like he said, learning my own learning style was instrumental. I mean, I was a C student my whole life until the HALE program, and I actually started to get good grades, like ones that I was proud of, because I was interested in the work. The HALE program actually helped me read my first book from start to finish. I was 35 years old. I had never read an entire book. I didn't have the attention span to do that my whole life. And finding things that were helping me understand myself better, it changed my life in terms of helping others, and then just trying to figure out what the path was for Laura, because it changed so much from when I was younger.
Very powerful. Thank you both for sharing. And as someone who's an adult learner scholar, I'm just curious, both of you in so many ways have shared how the HALE MA program helped to affirm learning happens in so many different ways, right? That learning doesn't have to be fun, like you said, Dreux, that it has its hurdles and it has its reasons for that. But Laura, how learning can be very empowering when you find what you're learning relevant to you, right? So, I mean, those are powerful, but I'm just curious in terms of how you now bring the HALE MA program into your fitness activities, in the way you engage in all these different types of wellness scales that we're talking about, the physical. I mean, we're focused a lot on the physical so far, but spiritual, communal, like, I'm just curious, like, for instance, and this is just, I'm not trying to impose on you, Laura, but like, when you're teaching cycling, does any of the adult learning theories ever apply? Or, or Dreux, when you're engaging with this idea of, here's a goal I have to set. I'm starting to think about motivation theories and all that stuff. We were talking about extrinsic, intrinsic motivation. So I'm just curious, like, were there any substance, or maybe it's not relevant? I'm just curious.
I'll jump in, because one of the biggest things while working with students is and I might be saying it wrong, but the community-based leadership model is super helpful to understand. So I'm going to so many student spaces, and I think some of the traditional leadership models of like, oh, this person is that, this person is this, based on that, they're a leader, right? And then moving more to now this community-based leadership, this community-based models has been so helpful as our inter-student spaces, right? Which as professionally has added to my wellness, but also has, part of wellness for sometimes adults with degrees and in positions of power is humbling, right? Like, let's humble ourselves to these students who I can learn from just as much as them. So using some of those models has been super helpful to understand What are we discussing? What do we want to actually get to? I'm not the expert in here. I just have more experience than you. I have more maybe background in you, but you all are the experts given that it's your space, right? So that community-based leadership model has been super helpful in entering a lot of these professional spaces that I'm in, if that's, yeah.
That makes sense. It reminds me of the co-construction of knowledge, that both students and you are co-producers of knowledge. Laura, anything resonate?
For me, when I was in the HALE program, I was only teaching 1 or 2 cycling classes a week, and you can't really be an expert when you're doing that just because you're doing it for fun type of thing. Well, after the HALE program and this refound time that was given back to me, I kind of became on this mission to be the best cycling instructor in the Lansing area. And I don't know how that kind of came about other than people started to accept me and my teaching styles. And I do think it is a lot of the things that I learned in the program in terms of interchanging a lot of different types of learning, using numbers when I'm talking to the class, going to the students' spaces and helping them so that they felt more comfortable. Just doing all of those things to make people feel safe and like they were more in control, because walking into exercise class for the first time when you've never done it is very intimidating. You don't know how many times those students have been there, how skilled they are. You don't know if you're going to fit in with that community. So I always try to build an environment that brings everyone together. And, being someone who is older, middle-aged, being an instructor, I understand how it feels to be younger and to go into those settings. And so what I try to do is I try to get to know the students' names. I try to find ways to make them feel comfortable so that they come back and be a part of our community so that it continues to grow.
One thing I want to add too, because Laura, you kind of made me think about it. One of the things that the HALE MA program has done for me as far as wellness has positioned me to be comfortable with critiques and constructive criticism. I don't think that you can get through probably any master's program, but I can speak directly to this one, without those critiques, right? And that's not something that's practiced, I think, by most people. Like, how do you take constructive criticism? How do you get feedback on something oftentimes that maybe you wrote or you presented and you own it, right? And it feels a part of you in some way. And for somebody to say, that was good, but fix it, or add this, take away that, not quite where it needs to be, right? Those are all critiques that are very real. And now I see how that translates to the professional world and professional wellness, because that's what it is, right? If you're not able to participate in the process and understand that, multiple eyes, multiple opinions can add to the work, and that doesn't take away from you, you as a worker, you as an educator, you as a learner. And that was a really important lesson for me to learn through the HALE program, which, like I'm reading it, I'm like, I'm doing it, and then I write it, and it's like, yeah, I get it, but that's not really what the author was saying. It's like, so that critique, that feedback has made me more critical, in a good way, of the work that I present, the work that I do, but also made me more, I don't want to say durable, but helped with my, part of wellness is being able to navigate spaces that you may not be comfortable with and feeling confident in yourself in that. And the program has definitely done that, and I mean, Dr. S, you can testify, from March to, I think, April, I was emailing you every week, like, yeah, okay, I edited, here you go, here, redo it, right? And you sometimes want to take it personal, like, oh, I got to do it, but it's like, no, this person is, if their heart and their mind is in the right place and they're giving you feedback, it should be taken as such and done something with. And I just have to say that that's something that this program has definitely taught me, because in the professional world, most unions or most, you're getting critiqued every 6 months, if not more than that, like step up, step back, do this. So I just have to say that as well.
Yeah, as I'm listening to you, Drew, and both of you have not used that term, but that is something I hear throughout your whole trajectory: the willingness to learn from our failures. The willingness to learn from our failures, right? What's working, what's not working, What can we learn from others' failures, the feedback we receive, things like that. No, that's really, really interesting. Just, especially Drew, when you said those examples, the feedback, right? We're so scared to fail. And by fail, I'm not saying we're giving Fs. That's not what I'm talking about here. You got an F or a D. That's not the point. The point is you may have not met a particular standard that we believe you have, right? So, Laura, can you speak to that? Does that resonate, this idea? Because, I'm hearing you speak throughout, right? What's working, what's not working. You talked about how the HALE MA program came at a point in your life whereby things were not going and you were nudged in this direction for whatever reason, I don't know, right? Can you speak to us about what can we learn from you for the HALE MA program, for HALE MA students as they think about cultivating wellness inside and outside of grad life, because many students are just like yourselves, both of you. They're working full time. They have other commitments, family commitments, community commitments. They're juggling everything, right? What lessons do you have to share with them about how they can still foreground and center wellness in their lives?
I think, a huge lesson, and I think you were pretty instrumental in this lesson, Dr. S, was reflecting not only about the failures, but about the successes, reflecting on what you could have done differently. I do think that the HALE program, because of those feedback loops, did help me become a very humbled professional in terms of when others make mistakes, how their mistakes might impact me or others, and having those open lines of communication about, okay, this is what we wanted to happen. This is what actually happened. Let's talk about the path that we had there. I'm much more comfortable giving feedback that may not always be, sugary, if you want to find a fun term, I guess, for it. But we're human, and take those moments to do your grateful journal at the end of the night, Dr. S, and think about the things that you did well for the day, because a lot of the times, it may feel like more things went wrong than went right. And it's good to try to focus on those so that you can get through the tough times.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Laura. Drew?
Just speaking to those things that but I'm trying to pull up the question. I'm sorry, because we were talking about
yeah, the 2-3 lessons you have to share about centering wellness. Yeah,
I mentioned it earlier, but I think they kind of go together, and I want to say them again. But discipline and consistency, finding what you want to do, and dedicating yourself to that, and I think that looks different, whether, like I say, that's once a week, once a day, once every hour, right? Finding that and doing it every day. That really helps. And then once like I said earlier, once you find out one area, it's going to spill over to others. I think another thing that's been a theme for me here is really finding those relationships and finding that community. I think we have a very Americanized lens that is individualistic, that is saying that, bootstraps, meritocracy, like this idea that all these things, right? But I just don't think this life or anything that's related to wellness should be done alone. By all means, you should spend time by yourself. But you also need a community to build, to support. I find that community helps me keep hope. So in those difficult times, whether that be, whatever part of wellness that you're working on, I think you need to find those people, those loving, caring people, and nurture those relationships. And that's also proven to improve your wellness. As Laura has mentioned, when you do work for yourself, you work with others, that improves everyone's overall wellness. And then going right in last but not least, find a joy in this. Find a joy in the wellness. Find what you enjoy about it. Why do you want that? and you find that joy, and you use that as a catalyst to keep to stay consistent.
Thank you, both of you, Laura and Drew. Did you want to comment on each other, or can we now kind of open it up for Q&A? What do you feel? Yeah, we can open it up. All
Bring
right.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
This is the hard part, right?
No, well, for me, in my experience, this is the hard part, because people don't say anything and are like, what's going on, right? So I hope we didn't scare people off.
I hope they can see how friendly we all are. We are open to questions, and we talked about not knowing everything. So
yeah,
We're student developers, right?
And also, we're here to learn from you too. So please share comments, questions, your own experiences. Does this resonate or not? Yeah. Please unmute. I think, is it James McGill wants to say something? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm unmuted, Dr. S.
Yes.
So I think my question is just as far as work life and home life and being a student, how did you all balance that? Obviously you have careers that demand a lot, so that's my primary concern or question.
So if I heard you correctly, James, is it James? Am I saying your name right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah, no problem. You know, what you were asking is, how do we balance all these different categories of our life, like work, home, as well as student life? Is that what I heard correctly?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, perfect. Laura, Drew?
I would say there was days that I was better at it than others. And I think Dr. S saw some of my better days and some of my not so good days. I mean, I agree with what Drew said. Finding the love and the passion that you have in the certain parts that really resonate with you is really what helped to get me through the program. And then finding ways to, what did you call the term? Folding?
Oh, yeah.
In temporal scholarship, we call it folding time together. Yeah.
Folding time. It was trying to find ways in which my children could be a part of things. May it have been them coming to a cycling class, or there were a lot of nights where I had to stay late after my workday at MSU, and then I was taking classes at night. My kids would come to campus for dinner with me, even if it was just quick interactions. My children understood what I was working towards, and they became part of my support system because they saw how hard I was working. So, you know, it comes back to that term of intentional efforts in areas that are important for you.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, James, because I actually wanted to make sure we talked about it a little bit earlier. But first off, I think this is the time I would have to say thank you to my partner. Like having that's part of my community. My wife was able to do so much that it was allowing me to navigate different time frames. But for me, having a family, I have 2 young children, working, you know, part of it was the scheduling part. Like I tell my students all the time, write it down, create time, put it to the side. Like I literally will put in my calendar, go to the gym from 5 to 6, and I'm reading from, you know, at night from 7. Like I put that in my calendar the same way I would any event, right? And that's part of it. So considering it, I had a community, I was able to say, here's my schedule, this is what I'm doing. So then that allows other people to prepare if you have that style of community. But it also held me accountable to myself, because, you know, if you got a calendar, it beeps on your phone 15 minutes before, then it keeps beeping when it happens. So it just was like, hey, Drew, you need to do these things. I had a conversation with a friend today who's finishing their master's thesis and different program, different university. But I'm like, how much have you done? None. I said, well, look, have you put on your calendar 2 hours on Saturday morning and then 2 hours during the week where you're going to actually sit down and do this? You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to, and that's part of the discipline. Write it down, put it in your calendar, make it a must. I mean, you do this. If you were going to the movies, you put that in your calendar. If you got a meeting, you put it in your calendar. This is a meeting with yourself. This is something that's important to you. So that was what did it for me. This is what I'm doing at this time. Because other than that, you waste time, or you do things that are more fun. So, when you set that schedule, it's super helpful in that context, James.
Mm.
Yeah, that answers my question definitely. Because when I did my MBA, I was in a different mind frame. It was online, I was working. And that was probably like 2011. So fast forward, this is 2000, almost 23. That's I have it's been a minute since I've been in school, but I've continued to be a lifelong learner and I enjoy learning. And then I think I'm finally in the career that I'm going to be in and just keep elevating it. But I know education, students, higher learning, this is what I want to do. So like the desire and passion will definitely be there. And I like what you said about kind of being intentional with your calendar. That's one thing I've learned being like I worked for myself for a minute, and then once I started working for extension, my calendar was like my best friend. So that's like embedded in my brain to put it in my calendar. So that's very helpful what you all said, for sure.
Thank you so much, James, for being part of this journey and sharing your question as well as sharing what worked for you. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Others, I think I saw Jim unmute and then mute themselves. Don't want to pick on you, Jim, but I notice it.
Oh, okay. Sorry. No, sorry about that. I just have to wait for a second. Yeah. I find I wished it was embedded in school curriculum, and I'm not talking just physical education or, maybe when kids get later in life, that phys ed can be something, doesn't have to be an active course in wellness. I just think it should be embedded in the curriculum from kindergarten and on. There's a program called, I think it's called Go Doodle. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but it's something that it's like exercise, but like things that can be done right in the classroom. So yeah, it's that and mental health need to be, gosh, what's been going on in this country, the terrible tragedy in Virginia and Idaho, and yeah, I can't say enough about both physical and mental wellness.
Jim, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I'm curious, how did you come to this particular session, and where are you at? Like, are you working at a higher ed or other profession, or just curious how you came to this particular session.
Oh, okay, so I work at the educational technology arena.
Okay.
And I was looking for like some webinars to attend, and I noticed this one.
Okay. Thank you for being here, Jim.
I love East Lansing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the point that Jim is bringing up is very important, because when we talk about curriculum or learning outcomes, oftentimes wellness is not at the center of that, right? Like, the physical, like what Jim is raising, like this is not something that should be an add-on. It should be central throughout. Do you have any comments yourself to add? I mean, Jim is raising a very important point.
I think one of the things that I would add is that the journey looks different for every single person, which is, I think, why it's so hard to embed it in the educational field for students, is because it's so different for every student. I found the importance of that community piece when we went to COVID, and I didn't have that feedback loop from my students in front of me. I hated teaching through Zoom. I didn't get the endorphins from the people being around me. And I could see myself not participating in the activity the way I do when I have someone that's looking right at me, like, what's this lady going to do next? And just, when my students are working hard, it makes me work harder.
I 100% agree with James. I don't know what it looks like. I would have to do a lot more research into curriculum building and know what that looks like. To your point, Laura, just the differences in student styles and learnings and things of that sort. But I do agree, and I think it's a missing component of just this care and concern that we can have for each other that could be incorporated with any level of education that I think brings more out of the learner, right? Knowing that you're cared for, right? We see so many tragedies happening within our school systems based on students not feeling welcome, students not feeling as if they belong, and that doesn't have to be written in curriculum. So it does need to be some sort of shift in what we consider wellness, what we consider to be success, what we consider to be, all these different things that we can learn and can be helpful in the realm of education. But I don't think we've hit that mark quite yet. It's tied to other systematic issues as well. So I don't think it's just the educational system. Once again, we have an individualistic society that says that makes us compete in different ways, right? And in some ways, education is no different. So yeah, I think it's a lot of room, should I say, for a paradigm shift in education, earlier education, all the way up to higher education, where it's a level of care and concern that could be added that I think can benefit all parties, teacher and learner alike.
Drew, when I was listening to you, and this is a joke I made at the faculty meeting recently, and the joke was, what do we mean by well prepared? When we say, graduates or students are well prepared, the prepared part seems to be something people can define, but what is well, right? And I wonder if, as I was listening to you, the notion of having wellness is part of that preparation as a definition of well prepared. Someone who feels like they belong, somebody who feels powerful, like the way both of you were articulating, right? Feeling empowered through the kind of wellness activities you were engaged with, things like that, is something, it just made me think about that. Other questions or comments? I really, really appreciate our guests here today raising questions, because often it's very silent. So really appreciate, both James and Jim raising questions. But yeah, as Drew put it, we don't bite. So
When I think to East Lansing numerous times, I just think of the area lends itself to wellness. It's such a beautiful campus, the outskirts of it, and the Red Cedar River, everything's. Plus, I'm a big sports fan, and the athletic programs there. They've done amazing work at Mount Arena recently. It's just, it's a great place.
thank you for that.
Welcome.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Sal.
What happens around this time as people get into this funk? What did you all do when you encountered a funk? How did you get out of it? Because I know that some folks may be experiencing that. I know that sometimes I experience that too. So that's my question.
Yeah, funks are for real, especially daylight saving, right? Whether it be seasonal with the daylight savings time, and right, if whoever's on here in Michigan knows what a fall and winter funk or something can be. But so it's two things for me. That's when I lean on that community. I have those same groups, but then also that's when I lean on my discipline or my schedule to say I still have this to look forward to. I know at the end of the week, because I've done this, I've read this, I can now do this. So it's always helpful in those ways. But I've even seen people do different things, like get those UV lights in the room, like do different things. You have to know yourself, know what may get you in a slump, and consult with those close family, friends, and community, and see what you got, see what ideas you can do. Look, make sure you're getting enough vitamin D, right? All these different small things that really matter, but we often forget about in this often hectic life that we can live. So yeah, reach on the community, ask those questions, figure out what's actually getting you in a slump. And one thing that hasn't been said about wellness that I think we probably should mention, consult professionals, right? I think mental health has been on the forefront. I think longer than the pandemic, but the pandemic has shined a different type of light on it. some of the stigma or taboo that comes with seeing professional counselors, professional therapists, psychiatrists is leaving. I know it's still there in some ways, but I want to name that. Like, let's seek professional help if need be, right? This hasn't been said, and I think it should be. So, yeah.
Laura, do you have anything to add to Sal's question?
I get in the funk all the time. I am not immune to it. That's where I've found it's really helpful that cycling has become a scheduled part of my life. I never regret it afterwards. I definitely at times struggle to get there. It helps that I'm the teacher and the class can't happen without me. But you know, there are times when I go there and I'm just like, I'm not feeling this today. And usually, again, it comes back to what I've already said is the people in that class, like they showed up too, and they may be in the same funk, but they're getting some kind of vibe from me. I'm getting some kind of vibe from them. And then together we do it. And it's a beautiful thing.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm listening to both of you, and one of the key themes throughout this whole conversation today is the role of community and accountability, right? That, Laura, you were sharing that, even in those days where we may not be at that spirit, by being with other people, forced because you're the instructor, changes or shifts us, right? And as you were saying, Drew, there's that, like, even notifications are a form of accountability, right? Reminding us that this is what we had scheduled ourselves to do. So yeah, that's very, 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 very interesting. Very, very interesting. Other questions or comments, or Laura or Drew, do you have questions for each other?
Drew, you're gonna have to come to one of my cycling classes now.
I was thinking about that, and we talk about discipline. Cycling is a complete spin, is a different one, because different, like, your legs are such an important part of your body. So when those are sore, it impacts quite a bit. So no, I'll be excited to join, but I'll make sure I take some Motrin after.
It's fun. I mean, it's really nice now that we're finally starting to kind of get on the other side of COVID. I don't know if we'll ever be out of it, but get on the other side of it. And it's really nice to get, like, teaching at IM West. It's really nice to see some of the new freshman students that are on campus and them embarking in their own wellness journey, and then just trying to help support them in that. I have one student left from prior to COVID. So she's a 5-year student. She's been coming to my classes for 5 years, and she's going to graduate in December. So it's nice to see who's going to be, sitting in her seat after she leaves, because I mean, I'm sure Drew, and I'm sure you, Dr. S, we're still here after they leave. The imprints that they've left on our lives, we're still here. I just moved into this office and I'm looking at some of the notes that students in the past have wrote me, and I'm still here. They say they're going to come back. So just remember, we're still here.
I love that, Laura. Yeah, I mean, especially when students graduate and stuff, and you have this very intense relationship with them, right? Like Drew, you were mentioning 1 month giving each other feedback, right? And then suddenly you're like, oh, where did this person disappear to? So with that said, it was such a pleasure, Laura and Drew, to have you. I mean, I don't think I've laughed this much in one of these series. So this is, I realize I need to laugh more, and we need to laugh together.
That's part of wellness, Dr. S,
Exactly.
laughing, right?
And so we need to do more of this. But thank you so much, and thank you for all those who joined us. I mean, for me, a speaker series like this is all about healing, right? It's all about affirming what we do, why we do. It's a way to affirm what we've done or what we've learned. And so thank you so much, Laura and Drew, for being here, sharing your stories and journeys. And you've got me pumped now. I feel powerful to do more of this. So thank you again. And I want to give a quick shout out to Salo, who's helped us put all this together. Salo's behind the scenes.
And keeping
always,
track of us.
yes,
Keeping track of us.
keeping track and everything. There's always logistics behind all of this, and we often miss that. So just like, when we go to these gyms and stuff, there are people cleaning up after us, right? Like a lot of things going on that's invisible. So this is for all those people as well. All right, take care, Laura and Drew. Please keep in touch.
Yep, thank you.
And please come to our other sessions. Take care,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you. Peace.